There's no other space like this anywhere else. Trust me. In the Bronze Age, it was one of the major centers of metallurgy. The people around didn't understand what those metallurgists were doing there. Metal in all times is one of the main parameters of civilization. We say the Great Silk Road and so on. So in those times, the way was vice versa from us to them. We can state that central Kazakhstan is the ancestral home of the first iron. Professor Murakami was here, who is also interested in studying the ancient mining and smelting industry. This is a caste, yes. People associated with fire. They were treated like shamans.
Как шаманы.
The cradle of our race had been rocked under these stars. Here had our childhood been spent. Edward Nelson Fell, 1916, from the book Russian and Nomad. Saryarka, the cradle of civilization, in the footsteps of Edward Nelson Fell. Who were our distant ancestors? What could they do? What spark of evolution did they manage to ignite thousands of years ago? And how long past time can unite us? People, separated today by borders and harsh realities. This girl's name is Tin Kai, an unusual name for a girl of European appearance. In fact, it is her creative pseudonym. Tin Kai writes books, participates in cultural projects, and the palette of her interests and travels is as colorful as the national ornaments whose symbols she studies. But recently, Saryarka has been holding a special place in her expeditions. I know that this is the sacred center of Kazakhstan, but at the same time it is the center of ancient industry. Today it is a major industrial center of the country.
I'm trying to understand if there was some connection between the material and the spiritual in ancient times. There are almost 6,000 kilometers between the capital of Kazakhstan and the British city of Cardiff.
This is the home of James Vance Agnew, sculptor and custodian of the family archives. James's most famous ancestor was Edward Nelson Fell. He founded two towns in the United States, Narkosi and Fellsmere. And back in the early 20th century in Tsarist Russia, in its steppe province, Fell ran a transnational copper project for 7 years.
There is the Uspensky mine and the Spassky smelter and the coal mine at Karagandhi, and the route they must have taken.
But it is unlikely that the name of the British mining engineer would have remained in the history of Kazakhstan if not for his book about his time spent in the distant steppe and his statement, which Fell's contemporaries considered a fiction. There were in this world a great many things of which we had never thought before, and of which our civilization had told us nothing. Does a descendant of Nelson Fell, while studying the family archives, understand what his great-grandfather meant?
I'm a historian by nature, I think, and I've grown up with a feeling of history, and because I worked with stone, very aware of geology and the effect that that has had on history and of civilization, and the way that it influences both the history of people and the ecology of the place they live, and the way that all that ties together into one single.
This is also how the interests of different people can come together when they want the distant to become close and the obscure to become intelligible. And to prove this, we go to the place where, according to Nelson Fell, the cradle of civilization rocked. From a bird's eye view, this picture is striking in scale and diversity. The mountains and hills seem to be printed on a 3D printer. Generous brush of nature painted green spots of copses. The blue ribbons of rivers and the silvery saucers of lakes add lightness and motion to the space.
The steppe expanses offer boundlessness and calmness.
This is Saryarka. In ancient times, its territory was called differently. Aspasia, Scythian mountains, Disht I Kipchak. But for those whom this land was sacred, called and still call it Saryarka. Saryarka owns its landscape to the greatest architect, whose name is nature. In ancient times, there were high mountains here, but under the influence of the sun, water, and especially wind, the mountain giants began to degrade, weathered, and settled. As a result, such landscapes appeared which give rise to the most unexpected comparisons. Where the sky kisses the ground, that's it. It's a wonderful kiss. There's no other space like it anywhere else. Trust me. The uniqueness of Saryarka is not only in its peculiar landscapes, complicated geological processes that were going on for millions of years in the bowels of the earth led to the formation of minerals. And in the late Bronze Age, rich deposits of such minerals as copper ore created the prerequisites for a technological breakthrough in this region. Metal at all times is one of the parameters of civilization development, a symbol of wealth and special status. Therefore, during the Bronze Age, there was a powerful push in metallurgy. The turn of the 3rd and 2nd millennium BC, the Bronze Age passes the baton to the new centers of civilization. The largest by area among the new metallurgical provinces is the Eurasian province. Its other name is the West Asian province. Its area is almost 8 million square kilometers. New metallurgical provinces are being formed in that area. One of them is Kazakhstan. Several metallurgical centers successfully operated within its boundaries during the late Bronze Age. These centers, rich in copper deposits, were actively working with metal, and these centers had similar technology, as in the Urals and in general in the West Asian province. Even the web of time could not hide the traces of the ancient mines of Saryarka. Ulutau, Jizkazgan region. The knocking of tools of ancient miners was heard in these places 4,000 years ago. In 1772, military topographer Nikolai Rychkov wrote that in these piles of earth are hidden set of copper ores, dug by ancient inhabitants. The same conclusion was made more than a century later by mining engineer Nelson Fell, who came to Saryarka on instructions from London to study its copper potential. The most impressive remains of human activity are the old workings of the copper mines. These are undoubtedly exceedingly ancient and are referred by some to an age before iron was known. In the 20s, already in Soviet times, the founder of Kazakhstani geology, Kanish Satpayev, found mine workings with traces of visits of ancient miners during expeditions. The question arises, what ores were searched by ancient miners? At the dawn of metallurgy, the subject of their search was native copper. This fancifully shaped ingot, resembling cosmic rock, is native copper. It is easier today to find native gold, native silver than native copper. One is born once. Under high temperature it rose, filled in as it were the gaps of the voids, and it stayed that way. Today, native copper is collected by geological museums as a rare mineral. This ore contains up to 99% copper and is characterized by plasticity. That is why ancient metallurgists did not smelt native copper, but made various products of it by cold forging. From using native copper, metallurgists of Saryarka switched to smelting oxidized ores. Here they are malachite, azurite, chrysocolla. Don't be surprised, in the Bronze Age, copper was extracted from these minerals, which we consider to be precious stones today. As this ore was notable for its high copper content, let us call it excellent ore.
Oxidized ore was processed in surface-type furnaces, in small reflection furnaces. In a small furnace, a melting bowl was put with ore crushed to a powdery state, and it was mixed with fusible materials.
To understand how such a furnace worked and at the same time imagine the whole process of production in ancient metallurgy, let's go on a very interesting excursion.
Qaraghandı region.
Ulitau district, 60 kilometers from Jizkazgan, Jizdi village. Here is the only museum of mining and smelting in Central Asia.
Its uniqueness is that it operates on the principles of a live museum, where you can touch everything with your hands.
70% of our exposition is located in the open air. Another peculiarity of the museum is that there are models of a mine furnace and a surface furnace, which was used in the territory of Jizkazgan. This is what an above-ground furnace looked like, in which ancient metallurgists smelted malachite and other oxidized ores. Similar heating structures were found by scientists in the 40s of the 20th century on the territory of the settlement of Milikuduk near Jizkazgan. This model of a ground furnace is an operating one. Therefore, the temptation to try on a role of the man of the Bronze Age is great. Primary sorting of ore ancient metallurgists carried out on a place of its extraction. Then they transported ore. On the coast of reservoirs, they carried out secondary sorting. After sorting, the ore was crushed and milled with stone tools. The prepared ore was washed to separate the waste rock. The wood was used to make charcoal, which was used as a source of heat during the smelting process. At first glance, smelting ore in a surface furnace does not seem to be very difficult. In fact, it was not. It was necessary to maintain a high combustion temperature at all times,
and the ancient smelters used bellows for this purpose.
These devices, made of leather, were used to supply air through holes in the bottom of the furnace. Each technological discovery made the hearth of ancient metallurgy burn even brighter. A great achievement of Saryarka metallurgists was mastering the production of bronze, an alloy of copper and tin. Bronze is easier to melt than pure copper, and in the form of the finished product, it is much harder and stronger than copper.
How did the ancient metallurgists figure out the secrets of smelting? What did they use when the supplies of malachite ran short?
They had no knowledge of geology, chemistry, and physics at that time. During the Bronze Age, there was a huge number of metallurgical settlements here, where the entire population was engaged in experimenting and creating the perfect furnace for smelting copper. With a time span of more than 3,500 years for the history of ancient metallurgy, this area is a landmark. Ulitau district, approximately 80 kilometers from Jizkazgan city and 20 kilometers from Jizdi settlement. The confluence of two small rivers, Ulken Jizdi and Bala Jizdi. During one spring flood, the river changed its usual course and went through the village. The waters eroded its banks and brought ceramic objects and other artifacts to the surface. Thus, the ancient settlement of Tal Disai was discovered in 1992. and the expedition of the Qazaq Institute of Archaeology, named after Margulan, under the direction of Joldasbek Kurmankulov, started excavations. Archaeologist Antonina Yermolaeva has worked here since the first expedition, and since then, Taldisai has not let her go. One of the reasons is the mysteries of this ancient settlement. For example, the pottery found during the excavations revealed a high content of talcum powder. This is not characteristic of the pottery of the local tribes.
Керамику делали женщины.
Pottery was made by women, and because women were taken from other tribes so that there was no mixing of blood, these women brought the know-how of making pottery from outside. And by examining what additives were added to the ceramic dough, one can make very interesting and far-reaching historical conclusions.
Scientists who studied Taldisai ceramics concluded the technology of making pottery with talcum powder came here from the southern Urals, together with representatives of Alakul tribes. In the end, both benefited. A clan of visiting craftsmen joined forces with local tribes who knew where the ore was and how to work the copper. What else have archaeologists found out? That the ancient metallurgists used an additional source of fuel in addition to charcoal. Traces of dung were found on the slag. The slag solidified, and that's where the organic matter was. It stays there, its trace remains. This is the disorderly position of grass. They had cattle from different areas for copper, for product, for ore. But Taldisai's most valuable discovery is its copper smelting furnaces. There is a variety of their designs: surface, semi-mine, and shaft. In fact, it is a prototype of a smelting complex. And the most important mystery that scientists had to solve is the mine furnaces. There are no similar structures, at least in Kazakhstan, yet. Here you can see a three-chambered furnace, which consists of three furnaces. How did the ancient metallurgists come to create the mine furnace? They had already been using native, that is pure copper, and oxidized ores rich in copper, located shallow from the surface of the earth. So they had to learn how to work with sulfide ore, minerals like chalcopyrite, chalcocite, bornite. The name sulfide itself suggests that this ore contains sulfur. But we know that, and how did ancient metallurgists of Saryarka come to this? Empirically. For multi-component sulfide ore, slightly different designs in a different air supply system were required. This is how Shaft's furnaces came into being. Scientist Mir Kadirbayev first found such heating structures at the ancient settlement of Atasu in the 1970s. He noticed a curious peculiarity of these furnaces located deep underground. All mine-type furnaces had long horizontal chimneys from 7 meters to 10 to 14 meters long. By the way, Taldisai mine furnaces are more complicated in design than those found at Atasu by Mir Kadirbayev. There's one more important point. In the 90s of the last century, the Russian archaeometallurgist Stanislav Grigoriev challenged Kadirbayev's opinion that copper was melted in mine furnaces. His main argument, bellows, couldn't cope with their function in such a huge heating structure. We agree. Bellows won't blow through. So what is it then? It was a dead end for me as well as for Taldisai. The only proof can be an experiment. An experiment can prove or disprove the existing interpretation. Taldisai,
In 2012, at the invitation of Kazakh scientist Igor Rusanov, one of the best Russian specialists in experimental archaeology, came to Taldysai from Chelyabinsk.
The experiment showed how, without the help of fossils, air can flow naturally and create draft in the shaft furnace. This three-chambered furnace surprised archaeologists with its original design. Air was supplied by the fact that it had the exit of ducts to the surface, and the draft, which was created by a long chimney. Taldysai has not yet revealed its secrets. To study the process of melting of sulfide ores in more detail, some more experiments must be carried out. The secrets of copper smelting are waiting to be discovered. Complex research is needed to answer these questions. Therefore, today Kazakhstan's archaeologists cooperate with foreign specialists. In any case, the shaft furnaces of Saryarka can already claim for sensation in the history of ancient metallurgy of the Bronze Age. We can say that the invention of shaft-type furnaces belongs to metallurgists of central Kazakhstan, or, if to speak widely enough, of Saryarka. The Bronze Age has long been imagined in our minds as a primitive civilization, and even museums portrayed the life of an ancient settlement like this. Today we see a completely different picture. Bronze Age people were self-sufficient, and not only archaeologists but also technical experts admit it. The technology is so well thought out in terms of metallurgy that it really causes great respect for their knowledge, their approach.
Judging by the artifacts which are kept in museums of Karaganda and Zhizkazgan, the whole cycle of metal processing was mastered here in the Bronze Age: casting, stamping, forging. Products and the technologies which have been saved up in ancient Saryarka became the subject of exchange and trade beyond this territory. If we look at the famous tomb of Qin Shi Huangdi, it is their first Chinese emperor of the Qin dynasty, the founder of the Chinese state, as well as the famous terracotta army. They were all armed with bronze weapons. We always say Chinese silk, Great Silk Road, and so on. Well, in those times, the way was vice versa, from us to them. In terms of historical chronology, the Great Silk Road began in the 2nd millennium BC. Then the Copper Road was probably already in the 3rd millennium BC, or earlier in the 4th millennium BC. All of this information and speculation raises many other questions. For example, how did the Bronze Age people construct their material world? How did they perceive their environment? Where did they draw strength and inspiration from in the harsh conditions of life? I think that the Bronze Age is about three things: the technology of metal, the technology of clay and ceramics, and the technology of weaving. It was woven together, otherwise they wouldn't have survived. It's a clever life support system.
Вот здесь жилище, и внутри жилища две печки. Первая, это вторая, вот 7 метров длина.
Amazingly, people in those early days were thinking about how to make their production resource efficient.
If ovens were built, it means that they could serve for heating at the same time. Conditionally, yes, and for firing pottery and for making charcoal. And the people of the Bronze Age also knew how to save. In Saryarka Archaeological Institute, there is ceramic ware with traces of repair. They were simply patched up with special staples. Our civilization is now, metaphorically speaking, rubbish. Something is broken, we throw it away at once. They use the potential of anything till the end. The clothing of the Bronze Age also arouses admiration. This can be explained by their harmonious perception of the world around them. They lived in that natural environment, non-detached, where the top was the top, the middle was the middle world. The headdress and shoes were heaven and earth, and the dress itself was like a trunk, a mediator.
How long did the Bronze Age fire burn here? When did it begin to die out? And who managed to ignite the spark of a new civilization?
"220 kilometers southeast of Karagandi.
The Kent Mountains, the left bank terrace of a tributary of the Qazaq River. Here is a settlement of late Bronze Age, Alat. Thanks to this settlement, the origins of the ancient metallurgy of Saryarka were enriched with new sensational information. Here, where you are standing, this is the first lower layer. In the second layer, there is this furnace where iron was melted. This is the sensation of Alat. Here, in the late Bronze Age, metallurgists worked with both copper and iron ore. If such stone melted, it means that the temperature was high, and melting temperature of iron was 1,500 to 1,580 degrees.
Assumptions of the Kazakh archaeologists were confirmed during cooperation with Japanese scientist Yasuyuki Murakami.
This is an excavation from 2016 in which Professor Murakami participated. This is a path we protect. We close this furnace every year. We show it only to you. Professor Murakami heads the Center for the Study of Iron Age Cultures at Ehime University and is considered a world authority in this field. We did microchemistry and so on and showed that yes, in fact, iron was smelted there. This is great. Plus, this was confirmed by Japanese research by Professor Murakami. Laboratory analysis conducted by Japanese scientists have shown that metallurgists began to process iron ore here 3,500 years ago. That is 300 to 400 years earlier than officially established by science. If we find 2 or 3 more furnaces here, then we can declare that Central Asia, Kazakhstan, is the ancestral home of the first iron metal. As at Tal Desai, experimental smelting of iron ore by the ancient method was carried out here. Here is this porous, seemingly unsightly ingot, a semi-finished product of iron. It is called kritsa. This is the form in which iron was produced by the metallurgists of Alat. There is a connection between the spiritual, the sacred, and the material. And here, in this industrial, spiritual, and historical center, it is felt 100%. On the shore of our modern life, together with artifacts, valuable placers of information, and discoveries about the history of Saryarka are being brought out, about how the ancient people lived and what they were able to do, what they believed in and what was sacred for them, how our ancient ancestors passed away and what they took with them, when did society's elite begin to emerge and what signs can be used to judge its emergence. More than a century ago, British mining engineer Edward Nelson Fell made a sensational claim. The cradle of our race had been rocked under these stars. Here had our childhood been spent. Edward Nelson Fell, 1916, from the book Russian and Nomad. Today, the artifacts found on the territory of Saryarka show Nelson Fell's words were not so far from the truth. The great steppe has facets that we have not yet had time to polish with knowledge and the ability to create. And Saryarka, as the matrix of the great steppe, is giving us its signs.